Let's all together choose to challenge.
روز جهانی زن را تبریک میگم.
Undoubtedly, women are the superior strength of our society. Happy Women's Day, everyone.
Happy International Women's Day.
Happy International Women's Day, everyone. Choose to challenge yourself.
Good morning, everyone. Namaste. Sat Sri Akal Saryanu. Bonjour. I'm your host, Malika Kumar. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. Our speakers will address them at the end. I want to begin my remarks by encouraging us to acknowledge the lands we are meeting on, the traditional territory of many nations. I want to recognize Benchmark Corp is located on the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation. I am so fired up this morning as we are celebrating International Women's Day 2021. I am here to embolden upcoming young women to live and lead more bravely. The agenda of today's meeting is #ChooseToChallenge, the biases and the barriers that disempower women, beginning by looking within. Also explore how the pandemic affects emerging women. It's my pleasure to welcome our distinguished leaders on the panel, our partners, customers, and sponsor Hitachi, and most importantly, our guest. The COVID-19 pandemic has disproportionately impacted women across the globe. It will take time and concentrated effort on corporate leaders to level the playing field and encourage women to embrace their unique feminine leadership strengths and celebrate the value they bring. The good news is each of us play our part. Isn't that terrific? The International Women's Day 2021 theme includes choose to challenge your limits, challenge your doubts, and lastly, challenge to support more women. I was a little girl with dreams who became a woman with a vision. As Oprah Winfrey says it, the most important journey of our lives doesn't necessarily involve climbing the highest peak or trekking around the world. The biggest adventure you can ever take is to live the life of your dreams. Born in India, I came to Canada all alone in my 20s with big dreams. A proud immigrant and a woman, I work in technology at Benchmark Corp as a marketing consultant. I graduated from Schulich School of Business, York University. I'm proud to work at Benchmark Corp, a company committed to creating a diverse, inclusive, and welcoming workplace where employees feel they belong and are comfortable sharing their ideas and talents to help us innovate and thrive. In life beyond work, I'm an avid reader and a basketball enthusiast. Go Raptors! I give all the credit to my parents for instilling this ambition and mindset. One can never underestimate the influence of a mother in our lives. Needless to say, my mom gave up her dreams to raise me. She sat for hours helping out with education and inculcating the values of leadership, showing me magazines and news with women in suits and heels saying, "This is what I want you to be. You have to be financially independent." I adore the gift of ambition and empathy she gave me through her countless inspiring conversations. She always tells me, "Life is tough, my darling, but so are you." She broke so many old, irrelevant traditions, asserted herself, carved her own identity, at the same time keeping our extended family together with her love and warmth. As Rumi, the Persian poet, once rightly said, "We are born of love, love is our mother." For this reason and more, I cannot even begin to express how much gratitude and appreciation I have for my mother that God granted me in this lifetime. It's not easy to find a true leader to look up to. It's my immense pleasure to learn from Luke Villeneuve, President of Benchmark, and Shlomo Bilak, our Chief CTO, our Chief Technology Officer. Thank you for being the movers and shakers for gender diversity and for helping me establish myself as an expert in my field. I would like to express my gratitude to Alex Edwinston, our PR consultant, and Clea Gigantis, the catalyst for the catalyst for creating this event, for being my role models and inspiration. Your guidance and support are seemingly inexhaustible resources in my journey. Thank you for teaching me so much. So let's get started. I want to introduce you to our moderator. A ray of light is a ray of hope. Let's all leave the darkness and step towards the brighter path. For the last 25 years, she has been leading the school's research and case study group and has helped HPS faculty members write more than 200 case studies on organizations and managers worldwide. With that being said, I would like to call upon Karen Isabel Noop, the Executive Director of Harvard Business School.
So I guess I'm going to start with asking the panelists to introduce themselves very briefly and also to tell me how this year has influenced your view of women. What leaders have moved you? What is it that they chose to challenge? Luc, maybe we'll start with you.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see so many people so early here. My name is Luc Villeneuve. I'm the president of Benchmark. For those who've been working with me for years, like Alex, they all know that I've been doing these events for a better part of the last 10 years. And I have a lot of friends and colleagues here on the phone today. So thanks for joining us.
And how has the year influenced your view of women? We know that it is your passion and commitment, and Malika is an example of what is possible. But as you look back on the year, what has sort of struck you or surprised you? What have you learned?
What surprises me is there is more people looking to better themselves, and there is no path to assist them properly. So that's why we've created some different avenues to assist the people that are reaching out to us leaders in the industry, and there's not a lot of ways and tools to assist them. So we try to do our best by increasing connections, network extension, and trying to link these people to other folks that could be of assistance. So that's, to me, is the biggest thing. When we had no pandemic, it was easy to get to know what's going on in the marketplace. You had, different meetings, different events, they're face-to-face. You were able to exchange more than just a focus on Zoom or WebEx. The side chat conversation are really hard to have on WebEx. Versus when you meet someone in person, there's a lot of side chat conversation, getting to know a little bit more about what's going on in the back scene, where people may need some help, may need some assistance. Then you can do a better job networking people. But that has been gone for 12 months, and I find myself a little bit of a fish out of water with having these people reaching out to getting some assistance and have no home to send them to. So I know that Men's Allies, with the help of Sarah Parkett here on the panel, we created this LinkedIn distribution list, a very selected distribution list and when someone reach out to us, we can send to our colleagues the person, and hopefully someone can raise their hands, say, okay, I got this, I'm going to help that person. And we started that. I sent my first person through the LinkedIn a few weeks ago, and hopefully we'll see how that works. But we're trying to find ways to provide more assistance to people out of pandemic and will be looking for assistance.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's been a challenge, but it's also an opportunity because people now are connected through the internet. So in some ways, it can also be easier to reach out. Should we stay in the Benchmark family? And Cléa, would you like to go next?
Merci Karine. Bienvenue à tous. Je m'appelle Cléa Gigantes. I am the Client Director for Federal Government for Benchmark Corp. Honored and grateful to join you all. It's a pleasure. Thank you, Karine. So to the question, there's so much that I have taken from this past year, which has enriched my life. And one thing that I've done is, as a community, strength is in numbers. We help each other through community and service. And we help our sisters, our mothers, our daughters. I'm a mother. Everyone has been impacted by this pandemic, and there are ways and resources for people to help them. And you cannot do this alone. It takes a coalition. It does take a village. And that's been my focus, to help others. Thank you. Merci.
Sarah, should we go to you next?
Oui, bonjour tout le monde. Bonne journée de la femme. Je suis très heureuse d'être ici. Alors, je m'appelle Sarah Paquette. I'm the director of FINTRAC. FINTRAC is it's the financial intelligence unit for the government of Canada. And prior to that, I was the executive vice president at Shared Services Canada, the department responsible for the IT infrastructure within the government. So that's really how my journey to be an advocate for women started, because in a male-dominated area, I was the only woman at the management table, and I was also the only one giving hope to women within Shared Services Canada. And then when I started to be involved, realized within the government of Canada and within even the private sector, there was very few women in technology, and the ones that were there were real heroes, and they were fighting their way through, and sometimes just to stay, and they needed help. But reflecting on the pandemic, my first hero definitely goes to Teresa Tam. Every single day in the last year, she has been showing us strength, you know, admitting what she knew and what she didn't, giving us our best advice, even if the media were all after getting more information that she didn't have. So there's so many heroes around us that we have seen à l'œuvre dans la dernière année. So I'm thinking about the Great Wars and so many years it took for the woman role in those wars to be recognized. So when we're going to look at the pandemic, we're going to think exactly the same. How many frontline workers are women? Physicians, nurses, our professor, just receiving teachers, receiving kids into school when a lot of people were working from home. And then you flip that around in their personal life, and they are caregivers of the elderly, of the young children, of their loved ones. And then they really start they're being a manager at work and trying to support everybody and listen and ensuring to create a very good and respectful work environment. So there's so many women around me that inspire me and are doing marvelous things that I think we owe it to them to take the challenge. So to be an advocate, to talk about what shouldn't be happening in those days, and talk about what we could do better, or sometimes just to give them the voice, the space for them to talk. So there's so many things we can do. Choose the challenge, lead the way.
Yes, absolutely. I really like also how you go through and actually look, not just see, actively look for everyone and all the roles that people are playing. I think a theme what we see throughout is that leaders come in very different forms, play very different roles, some of them obvious, some of them maybe less obvious, but equally important. So on the topic of hope, I'm going to call on the next CEO in our panel to truly demonstrate what is possible with passion. Ria, let us hear from you.
Hi everyone, my name is Ria. I'm the founder of a company called SmartCane that's building an assistive device to help improve independence for the visually impaired. And thank you all for sharing your amazing stories. And I think just reflecting on the pandemic, a certain group of women that have stood out to me personally that were very inspirational to myself have definitely been moms over this last year. Like we've seen so many young women raising children, managing their kids, dealing with household responsibilities while all working and helping with homeschool. And I think just watching that has been so inspirational because they've been constantly choosing to challenge themselves in terms of what they were capable of and also being role models for everyone around them, like husbands and their children, husbands or wives. So I think through that, and especially during the pandemic, their resilience and dedication and diligence have really shined, in addition to their ability to overcome a lot of the hurdles that have constantly been thrown at everyone throughout this past year. And I think it's definitely reminded me of the strength and power of women, and how some of the biggest challenges that we endure are also barriers that we set for ourselves internally. So I hope that these qualities that they've exhibited continue to shine and are recognized in women as we try to include some more women in leadership roles and executive positions for those emerging female leaders that came out during this past year.
I'm going to stay on this theme about, what has made women so effective in the pandemic. So you started to give us some themes, but can we maybe dive a little bit deeper here? Research has come out that traits that were associated with women leaders in the past were, fundamental in COVID. Oh, is it on my side or? I'm not sure if I'm having issues or if the system is having issues, but
I think it might have been mine.
all right, no problem. So we were going to move next to dive a little bit more deeply on effective leadership traits. So it turns out that the pandemic really called on leaders to be highly flexible, more nurturing, and able to be vulnerable, just charge forward no matter what. And so, some of the traits in the past have been associated with women leaders. Can you maybe move us into a conversation about what actually has made women so effective in the pandemic? What is it that we can learn from them?
Yeah, sure. I think I cut out for a moment, but is that question for me, Kathleen?
I think so. Yes, you already teed up the some of it in your answer to who you are and how you've been impressed by the women of the pandemic. So please.
Yeah, for sure. I think women are honestly, I think, inherently very kind people, and that's something that I really appreciate in leaders personally, and also individuals that are actively embracing the diversity of thought, especially when you're making decisions and forming teams. So when we think of diversity, our minds quickly retreat to diversity from a racial perspective, but at the end of the day, I think the importance of diversity boils down to getting a myriad of experiences and perspectives from different people so that we can stimulate that intellectual conflict and challenge each other. And then at the end of the day, get solutions that are more optimal. And I think the value that comes with embracing diversity of thought as well in teams. So that can, in addition to that interesting complexion of experiences through gender and race, you can also get an interesting complexion of experiences through different professional backgrounds, different upbringings, experiences, and more. And I think that's something that women are a lot more perceptive to embracing as well. And I think also, personally, I think females are leaders that embrace like a culture of continuous feedback and iteration. And I think that's one of the most important qualities that I find in a leader. With SmartCane, like we usually had like feedback circles, and in any of the projects that I embarked on, to have those retrospective meetings, but of not just giving feedback, but actively asking for it. So it's that practice through failure and long-term thinking in mind, I think really permeates the mindsets of women. And also, they're definitely leaders that have the ability to not only like advocate for themselves, but the people that they work with and work under, because it's really important to make sure that you're challenging the people that you're working with and leading as well, so that they can grow as well. And sometimes this can mean giving them difficult projects to work on, or asking for their ideas in big meetings to make their voice heard, and even taking a step back from control and letting them learn how to figure things out and learn how to learn, that I think are qualities that are prominent in a lot of women, especially in last year. So this really helps nurture leadership at all levels. And I think that's definitely the way to go for sure.
This reminds me of maybe going back to you and sharing how this has presented for you in your career and what you've observed in the world of tech.
Is that for me, Karen? I didn't hear my name.
Sure, of course, yes, we can. I mean, but I think it'd be also interesting to hear from Sarah on this point, given her experience in her field.
Luc, je peux commencer. Alors, I think I really like the points that we were just talking about, but in the tech industry, if you think about it, it's really male dominated. And I think culturally, male won't allow themselves to be vulnerable or to look vulnerable. So it's not about none of them doing it. It's just more they had less opportunity and they have been less supportive growing up to be vulnerable, to be compassionate, to communicate and reach out. And I think it takes an extra effort for them to be uncomfortable and get into those areas. When for women, communication is easier, compassion is easier. We're used to pivot because we are always, not always, but I would say a lot of us are still the main care provider at home. So when you have 3 kids asking you a question each every 15 seconds, you always have to pivot and adapt. So when you come to work, you do the same thing. And when the pandemic hit and we all needed to learn new things, to do things differently, like we are just used to adapt all the time as mother and primary caregiver. And I think that's helpful. But also as a woman, we are used among friends to be vulnerable, to talk about things that are more difficult to us, to support each other. So again, you translate that into a work environment. And it's not about men not able to do it. It's just we're just more comfortable doing it. And I think that through the pandemic, that just spoke very loudly, reaching out to colleagues, checking out on people, ensuring to create the time to have those discussions. And one of the things that I think the pandemic showed is something I hated at the early 2000s when we were discussing hiring. People were talking about hard skills and soft skills. And I hated it. And I keep telling people, what are you talking about? Everybody has a brain. We need people to be able to be human in a workplace. So we need soft skills. And I think what the pandemic showed us is that those soft skills, nobody's talking about it anymore. It's just how to be a good leader.
Absolutely. You know, this notion that every type of leadership is also needed, and that we should be, you know, full humans and not just one particular version. Luc, you had wanted to jump in earlier. May I go back to you?
No, I did not hear my name. I didn't hear the name of the person you wanted to address. So that's why I thought maybe it was for me. But I had the fortunate to work with amazing women in my past 30 years. And in general, my experience is that women spend less time with internal politics. They're really focused, more focused on the task, the job, what they need to do to improve what they were hiring for. And I learned a lot by their listening skills. And what a woman listened to is very different than what a man listened to. The same conversation and 2 or 3 different messages that comes in that a woman will pick up, and a man will probably pick one, but there's 3 or 4 things that a woman will pick. So that's why I find that very interesting when to hear the perspective after a listening to a presentation, what the rest of the roundtable think about the presentation, because to reinforce the fact that women will read more things into the conversation than a man. I think we're more straight focused in some ways, and we don't bring the full dimension to the table. And I think I find that the man after the pandemic, the listening skills are going to be critical to retain our employees, because you hear things. Since I feel like women are better listeners, they're going to hear different things coming from the employees, from the people. And I think the right leader, woman, will be able to retain more their key people, maybe than a man, because of their particular listening skill set. So that's kind of what I see the difference in having more women in the workforce at the right place.
Mm-hmm. And also like the theme of complementarity that you teed up. So why don't we shift a little bit? You know, in my opinion, a lot of the things that we've discussed about women and their skills have always been there. And yet, you know, we remain with the data that we have in terms of, you know, CEO positions, board positions, unpaid care time, all the things that we've begun to address. So can we move to what is particularly challenging or difficult, maybe in this next panel of our conversation? And Jill, maybe I'll turn to you to ask, what are the systemic barriers, but also back to Malika's point, what may be some self-imposed barriers that, don't empower us to really live up to our potential as women in all spheres. Gillian, may I ask you for your opinion on that and your assistance? Also, I do want to remind the audience we really would like to hear your ideas. So please let us know what you do in your daily life, what you observe, and what suggestions you have from all of us. And Gillian, go ahead.
Thank you. Merci. So my name is Gillian LeBlanc. I'm located on the Algonquin territory, and my pronouns are she, her, elle. Si vous avez des questions en français, je peux répondre aux questions aussi. So one thing I wanted to highlight, just going back to the first question that we had about who inspires you, was something I was looking up and thinking about who inspires me. And for me, it was the chief medical officers across Canada, Dr. Teresa Tam, Dr. Bonnie Henry, Dr. Dina Hinshaw, Dr. Jennifer Russell, Dr. Janice Fitzgerald, Dr. Heather Morrison, and Dr. Tammy Condola. So, well, that probably just sounded repetitive to you. I was looking this up yesterday, and the Journal of Women's Health did a study and showed that women are only introduced as doctor 49% of the time. So I think it's really important to remember those things. And on International Women's Day, be reminded of the barriers that still exist for women. Anytime I see women taking up space publicly, I think it's a win for all genders. It's important to see women as experts and authoritative sources on the subjects that they are experts in. Going back to barriers, I think we can't just look at the workforce and say change. It's too late by then. We need to look way further back by then. We need to look at our education system and our societal expectations that rewards and punishes gendered behavior amongst children. Girls are discouraged from things like taking risks and being loud, while boys are discouraged from displaying emotion or being agreeable. And that was actually taken from a Harvard Business Review study about men being punished as feminists in the workplace, which is a really unfortunate thing to see. If we want to create leaders with the traits that you mentioned previously, we need to nurture these traits from a young age and positively reinforce it in society, inclusive of the workplace, and not shut down and have, I know that there's gender policing that happens both of women to women and men to men, men to women, and women to men. So we need to make sure to be aware of those. We need to prioritize community voices. Women are not monolithic groups, and people face different barriers at different points in their life. And it's important when you're designing programs or policies in your workplace. We need to be additionally wary of biological determinism, which is the thinking that biology dictates your abilities along traditional gendered lines. Not all women are natural communicators or even empathetic, and this can further entrench leadership expectations for women and punish men who exhibit traits that are deemed non-masculine or feminine. The pandemic has put a spotlight on the unpaid and underpaid work that women do to hold societies together. From the tightrope walk that working mothers do, from the importance for teachers and nurses, working in the front lines, women, and especially women of color, have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. This year has shown me that while we have made great strides in the past couple of years for gender equality, we cannot let the pandemic set us back on decades of hard-fought progress. We need to continue to push for more intersectional analysis and action before and after the pandemic. Hopefully it'll end one of these days, for different groups of women and gender diverse folks and how they experience barriers in society in different ways. It's important to dedicate, so this is some, if you have these abilities, it's important to dedicate resources to make intersectional gender equality a success in the organization. Hopes and dreams and well wishes and good intentions aren't good enough anymore. We need to actually put some effort behind it. And while financial resources are key to delivering meaningful systemic change, there are other resources if you don't have any financial resources to give to make gender equality a success. Allow your staff to take the time to do this work. Allow them to work during working hours. It's really important to me. If you really value this, you'll let them do it during work, and that doesn't include lunchtime or coffee breaks. Don't ask someone who's already overburdened to do this work, as often is in the workplace. Women and women of color are overburdened with other tasks already. If you can hire someone whose responsibility and who's actually educated in this work and has a background and experience doing intersectional gender analysis to focus on this work, support, that's so important at an executive level. As Vic and Sarah have mentioned, it's important to discuss this with your executive colleagues. You can assign a champion for this. It doesn't always have to be a woman who works on this. And you need to show and tell, but don't just tell that this is a priority for you and your organization. And finally, learning. Learning is so important. Model not knowing everything, but having the willingness to learn as a leader. Allow for learning budgets, bring in experts to the field to talk, look at mentorship and reverse mentorship opportunities. There's a free GBA Plus, which is Gender-Based Analysis Plus course from Women in Gender Equality Canada that anyone can take online. And finally, International Women's Day, it's important to be reflective of the space you take up. Take the panel pledge, as Sarah has talked about before, commit to no more manels, which is all male panels. And if you're a white woman, take it a step further and commit to not sitting on all white panels. Move away, and I guess the last thing I'll leave you with is move away from changing the individual. As Dr. Imogen Ko has said about women lacking confidence, don't tell women they just lack confidence and change the individual. Take a wider look at societal and systemic barriers that exist in your organization and change them, i.e. normalizing parental care for both parents. So I know that was all very fast, but I think those are some things. There's more I could talk about, but I'll let my other panelists talk about some of those issues and doing this.
And Jillian, thank you very much for the contribution. I like that you're moving beyond the talk to what is actually to be done, which is really how I think we should end this session. And you gave us some very concrete ideas, and maybe this is also something where the audience can help us some commitments to think about. What will we do today? What will we do going forward? And Jenny, I'm very sorry that I missed you in the introduction. So I'm glad that you caught ourselves up on your background and all that. So my apologies. Clea, what are your thoughts around sort of, not seeing women as monolith, that may be one of the big barriers? What can we concretely do to overcome these obstacles that we've begun to tease out?
Thank you, Kathleen. Well, you should start certainly with economics, because this pandemic has impacted women disproportionately more than men globally. I did some reading on the UN statistics and OECD, and it's shocking. So I would start with the fact that economics, for the growth of the GDP, we could see an increase of 35% if we had more women employed globally. So economics first, because that is the foundation for women to be successful, to flourish, and for other generations. We don't want a legacy of poverty to follow. So I would start with economics. I would also start with community. It's so important and vital that we have a community of supporters, including men. And in terms of participation for growth and stability equation, this matters. So if we look at boards and corporate boards, the OECD, 20% of board members are female. In emerging economies, these numbers are much lower. So, we're in the year of 2021. What progress have we made? Certainly in the tech sector, if we look at technology in the 90s, women represented, I think there was an increase of 31%, I was reading. Well, we're back down to 21%. And I'm certain this pandemic has disrupted that even more. If we look at, the brunt of economic disruption caused by this pandemic, notably in just America alone, as you know, Karen, it's impacted the workforce, and women accounted for 55% of the jobs I've researched because of the service industry. So I know I'm referencing statistics, but it's important. At a time of crisis, such as the one we're in right now, gender balanced leadership is more vital than ever. It's more relevant, and it's not just decision making, but it's empathy. And I know we brought this up earlier. Empathy, vulnerability is a strength in leadership, and it's often it's overlooked, but it is a skill, and it needs to be cultivated. We need to help our men allies because they are learning as well, and we have to do it together collaboratively. Kevin?
This theme of coalition and what can happen when, I think, is really important. And very concretely, you mentioned what is happening in the U.S. I mean, many women are facing a housing crises, and so things need to happen immediately on the economic front, and hopefully this is underway. Jillian mentioned encourages us all to think a little bit more upstream. I know we've been focused in the workplace. So maybe, Ria, I'll turn back to you, or maybe Malika also. You started to talk about things that were important to you in your life. The mentoring that your mother showed. Life is tough, but so are you. Ria, is there anything that you can tell, the world about how we can help younger individuals believe in themselves and in their dreams?
Yeah, for sure. And I'd love to, expand on Jillian's point. I think it definitely starts young. And especially as a young person in the tech industry, we don't really see or are exposed to a lot of female leaders, especially in technology and high roles that we can look up to as role models. And I think not seeing someone that looks like you can be a big deterrent for young girls that want to go and pursue STEM fields, because it can render like a lot of your aspirations and dreams and make them seem unattainable, or because you can't really see yourself in that position. So I think that's one of the biggest barriers. That is also one of the root causes for uh, just one of the many struggles that women undergo, especially in the industry. And I think the education system definitely needs a lot of evolving. I remember when I think I was in grade 6 or so a few years ago, we had to do an aptitude test. And we got certain, based on what we put in, we got potential career paths that we could take. And just the girls in my class, most of them got nurses. And those predetermined career paths based on just a few questions you answered about yourself. And I thought that was pretty insane, because none of them really touched on leadership roles or were adapted to reflect how the world is changing today. And if we take a look at the world around us, it's really evolving exponentially, but the education system has remained quite stagnant. And considering, how important it is to develop the future leaders of the world, you would think that that would be a priority as well, to make sure the education system and curriculum is changing along with it. So I think there's a few things that we can do to nurture this leadership, and especially in women starting young. Mentorship programs, personally, for me, have been amazing. Like for me, I usually just reached out to about 50 people or so, and that I looked up to and would love to get advice from. And you find that if you reach out to as many people as possible, you at least one will respond. So that's one way to go. But I think it's important to see how we can actually be intentional about fostering these mentorship programs or relationships with. So giving young girls mentors, a model of them in the tech industry, can not only expose them to a different world, but can also encourage them that they too can pursue something like that. And that advice that you can get by just learning from their experiences is absolutely phenomenal. And I think it can definitely shift a person that trajectory. I think the second barrier that a lot of women undergo, and especially young people, and why just this lack of exposure limits people, is that we kind of place internal barriers on ourselves in terms of what we believe we can accomplish. And I think that mindset is really important. And when I first wanted to start SmartCane, I definitely felt imposter syndrome quite a lot. And I think that's something that is not abnormal, especially around young people. So it's thinking about how can we actually instill mindsets within young women about saying that they can accomplish this and they can drive change in the world. Because my experiences in entrepreneurship, I realized that I don't think age or gender is a limiting factor to driving change or making contributions, but I think your ability to put in the work, like your passion, your ability to learn, but also learn from your failures, that's important. So thinking about how we can actually be intentional about instilling those values within young people.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, it's we have millions more questions and things to talk about, but we'll wrap it up. Maybe I'll ask just for the panelists quickly to share something concrete. So Ria just gave us the idea to reach out proactively to people who might be good mentors to us. I was thinking in terms of commitments today that, you know, on every 8th day of every month, I would actually pause and educate myself about women's issues, reach out maybe to 3 people who could be potential mentees or ex-mentors, connect to someone, sort of make it a practice of reflection, education, and connection to take this work forward. What are 3 things that people in the audience can do today and beyond that would make a difference? Maybe we can do a rapid fire of that. Maybe we can ask the audience to respond, and then we'll take some questions.
I can start, Karen.
Please.
So I think we spoke a lot about, you know, everything we've been living through because of the pandemic in the last year. But if we take a few moments to think about the positive that got out of the pandemic, it's something like an event today. Like nobody needed to actually ask permission, drive, take the time. We all did it from the comfort of our home. So this is out there for us to connect more, to share more, to be mentors of more people, because it's easier. So young women and older women can reach out. Don't be shy. Like Ria was saying, everybody has 10 minutes. Just ask for 10 minutes. And you will be absolutely surprised the number of people that will just say yes. And I would say do the same to upskill yourself. Like there's so many conferences and training that are now online or digital and free. So there's a lot we can benefit as women, even with everything else we have to do to invest in ourselves and to invest in others. And don't forget about the community that Ria was talking about. We all need a community. So create those groups, those buddies or just support group that are going to help you through issues or for you to help others, just creating those safe space to support each other. Because in the discussion I had with the deans of university, if you don't have 2 or 3 women in each team, it won't work because they will leave because they won't be supported and listened to. But if you can put 2 or 3 together, then they are coming together, support each other, and a lot more women will get through a university or college degree in science because of the support. So you can extrapolate that to your teenager or your neighbor and try to be there for them.
So I just tried to summarize those points in the chat. Please go ahead.
I was going to say also, Sarah, I think my point I was going to mention is keep your door open. There's a lot of people out there going to knock at your door, and us leaders, we need to pay some attention to the people reaching out. And you're right, I have 10 minutes, 15 minutes for many people, and I have never refused to connect or spend time with anybody. But I think out of this pandemic, we're going to have a lot more people who's going to want to have 15 minutes with you to get some coaching, to get some networking happening. And my last point on that front is men need to bring more men into the conversation. I think we are in position of power. We're in position of leadership. We're in position to be able to help more because the way the ranking of the different amount of man versus woman into leadership position. So I think we can help additionally on top of what we're doing today by having more men involved and participating in these events. So my demands on the phone here. Next event, invite a friend.
I'll go after Luke if I think that's great about inviting them to join in the conversation. And it's important, you know, International Women's Day to remind folks that men do have a gender too, and that's important to remember. And it's really important to bring them along. I think something that's really concrete. I come from the open government, open data world. Is look at the data both on who's coming to your organization, but really look at the data on who is leaving your organization. There was a great quote from Bridget Hyacinth from an article she wrote on LinkedIn that said, employees join companies but leave managers, which I think is an important thing to look at. And think about, are you creating a space for growth, progression, and inclusion actively, not passively? And who's leading this inclusive space change? Is it yourself? Is it a woman? Is it a person of color? Is it an LGBTQ person? And is that person being compensated for that extra additional work, which is real work, or is that just a side of desk, pat on the head type of work that they're doing? Do you value new ideas and new ways of doing things, or do you and are you open to unlearning previous norms that you have been previously told? So I think it's a good point about looking at your own organization, what is in the sphere of my influence, the sphere of my control as a CEO or as a junior person in the organization. That looks very different, but also constantly reflecting within yourself. I get it wrong all the time. I'm always making mistakes. I've been working in this area for many years. So I think it's really important to also allow yourself to make mistakes in this area and always be willing to learn and unlearn and be comfortable with that vulnerability and risk-taking space.
Yeah. I think we should mentor. Sorry, thank you. I think we should also mentor young men and older men. And we need to be allies for men. And there are many men out there who are interested. And I think a consequence of the Me Too movement, it created some panic, but we do need male allies, notably in leadership roles where women are underrepresented. We certainly need voices, but we need to work together because that creates a culture of change. And it creates at all levels, economic, it creates a mindset, it creates a culture that is inclusive, collaborative, all generations. So that would be my message, is we need to help men and we need to work together. Thank you.
Absolutely. We'll end on this this beautiful message. We also had a question in the chat about our working definition of what is a leader, to which I'd ask another question just for us to all reflect on, which is, how do you actually know that a leader is effective? So somebody might be doing very well in the stock market, but are they really taking good care of their employees? What are the definitions by which you sort of consider somebody to be effective and impactful? Thank you so much for the conversation. Thank you for engaging with us, everyone. Thank you to the panelists. I could talk to you guys all day, but I have to cede the floor and wish you all the best.
Leah?
Thank you. In closing, I would like to thank and express my deep appreciation to our sponsors, to Hitachi Vantara, the male allies, and notably our leader and president, Luc Villeneuve, an advocate for women in STEM. He's been a champion for many. Karine from Harvard, we are so honored and grateful for your presence here today, your intellect. You are a maverick. I would also like to thank our panelist, Sarah Paquette, incredible leadership and role model for all men and women, and Ria and Malika and Jillian, your expression and your thoughts. I mean, you've really provided some very concrete ideas and certainly challenge to action, which we'd like to see in our community, not just challenge, but challenge to action. And I would like to thank as well everyone who's watching. We are so grateful that you've participated. We welcome more questions as we're closing out. And I want to shout out to the male allies, Martin Bernier, CIO of University of Ottawa, Claude Day, IBM president, many people out there. You are allies and you are leaders, and we look to you as well. So thank you. And to my mother, who was a cabinet minister and politician, and my father, who was a male ally as well. So thank you.
It was an honor to spend the last hour with these distinguished women. It was a superb way to launch International Women's Day 2021. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope you enjoy the rest of the International Women's Day. We want to keep the conversation going. Please connect with the rest of the panelists and me on LinkedIn. So I will leave you with, where there is women, there is magic. Have a blissful day.
Thank you all. Great job. Great conversation.
Thank you, everyone. Ciao, ciao.